I want to just tell you, I'm very excited to be here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ben Adams, and I'll be sharing with you guys this evening. This is going to be my first time preaching, so I'm going to ask you to hold your tomatoes and your booze and everything else, so either hold them for the end or until I got my back turned. So I was born and raised right here in North Olmsted, and I have a beautiful wife, Leah, who's out there somewhere, and my two boys, Gabriel and Noah, and we've been doing really good. So God's been working in my life quite a bit, and over the last 5 years, He's been doing some amazing things in my heart. And I always had this relationship with God, like most people do. I believe that He created everything, and that He sent His Son Jesus to die for us. But I took that for granted for many years, and I never really gave myself to God. I thought about it. I lived a pretty good life in my eyes, and I didn't go out of my way to share God with anyone or to do the right thing all the time. In the back of my head, I knew or believed where I was going when I would die. But as for my family and my friends and people that I passed by every day, not so much. I didn't know where they were going. I assumed that some people were going to go to heaven and some were going to go to hell, because where else would they go, right? But it kind of hit me from the standpoint that if I didn't know where I was going, or if I didn't know anything about either destination, it just didn't sit well with my soul. So God started working in my life and giving me this burden for the lost. I started reading different books on evangelism and diving into my Bible more to read and just to continue to learn. I started trying to share with people and realized that it's really hard. And why is it so hard? I was met with swift resistance and mocking and abuse. I was discouraged. And, why am I filled with this fear, trying to tell someone about the reality of heaven and hell? I didn't know how to share my faith and sometimes how to defend my faith. So I studied more and started reading more books. And this time on apologetics and trying to be able to engage and have those tough conversations with atheists. And I enrolled in a school of biblical evangelism. And I've been reaching out to people since then and still attending. But God's been working in my life, and I've really been enjoying the ride. So I don't know where He's going to take me, but I want to put myself out there to be able to be used. So a few months back, I talked to Pastor Jeff, and I said, this is kind of out there, and maybe someday you can use me, and maybe someday I can preach. Really not thinking anything, since I don't have a preaching degree, right? Haven't gone to seminary, and lo and behold, a couple weeks ago, I get asked, "Hey, can you preach on the 31st?" I jumped on it. I said, "Yeah." Kind of zero concerns about being nervous that day. It's a little bit different right now, but I just ask that you bear with me as I get through this. I'd like to share a very serious message with all of you this evening. We're going to be looking at Romans tonight. It's in the New Testament. It was written by Paul, and the book of Romans was essentially letters from Paul, written to Rome, where he wrote to several hundred Christians that were there. He had only met a few of them traveling from time to time, but he wanted to introduce himself and set the record straight of what they thought of him or what rumors they may have heard. You see, before his conversion, Paul was a Pharisee. He followed the law very strictly, and as they did in those times. And he was quite the intellectual as well. He didn't agree with the followers of Christ, so he violently persecuted them who followed and who professed Jesus Christ. One day, while traveling to Damascus with warrants to seize more Christians, he was met by Jesus through a blinding flash of light. Paul was questioned by Jesus about why was he doing this. And he was left blind, and those that he was traveling with, they led him to Damascus. And it was there that he met someone named Ananias. And Ananias was instructed by the Lord to go and meet Paul and to heal his sight so that Paul could become God's new personal representative. and experienced the hard work that was involved with sharing Jesus with others. You see, Paul witnessed Jesus' healing and grace for himself firsthand. If there was someone that deserved a swift justice, it was Paul. But Jesus had much bigger plans for Paul, and he used Paul as an example of his grace, of his ability to radically change someone. Paul wanted to make sure that everyone understood this change of heart, this grace that he had found and that he had experienced. You see, it was thought that only the Jews followed and had God's law and were acceptable in God's eyes. The Gentiles had it all wrong, and were pagans, and they had to convert. Paul sent these letters, the chapters of Romans, to these Christians to teach them of God's saving grace, and that they're all guilty of breaking God's laws, and they'll be held accountable to God, whether they're Jew or Gentile. But we're going to look at Romans chapter 3. I'm going to be skipping through verses 9 and 20. Paul writes, "Do we Jews get a better break than the others? Not really. Basically, all of us, whether insiders or outsiders, start out in identical conditions, which is to say that we all start out as sinners. Scripture leaves no doubt about it. There's nobody living right, not even one. They've all taken the wrong turn. This makes it clear, doesn't it? That whatever is written in these Scriptures is not what God says about others, but to us whom these Scriptures were addressed in the first place. And it's clear enough, isn't it, that we're sinners, every one of us, in the same sinking boat with everyone else. Our involvement with God's revelation doesn't put us right with God. What it does is force us to face our complicity in everyone else's sin." Picture this. Two men are seated on a ship. The first one is given a life vest, and he is told to put it on because it would improve his trip. The guy's a little skeptical because he doesn't see how putting the life vest on is going to improve his trip on the ship. But after a while, he decides to experiment and to see if the claim is true. So he puts the life vest on. And the first he notices the weight of the vest and how tight it is around his neck, and that he can't sit all that comfortably with this thing on either. But he comforts himself with the thought that it's going to improve his trip. So he decides to give it a little bit more time. As he waits, he starts to notice that some of the passengers are laughing at him because he's wearing a life vest on a ship. He starts to feel a little humiliated as they point and laugh because he has this vest on and the ship isn't even sinking. He then takes the vest off and he throws it on the floor. Disbelief and bitterness settle in his heart as he feels that he was lied to about this life vest improving his trip. Now the second man is also given a life vest, but let's listen to what he's told. He's told to put this life vest on because at any minute this ship was going to be crashing into an iceberg, and he would have to survive in the water off the sinking ship. Gratefully, he puts the life vest on and he doesn't notice the weight. He doesn't notice it constricting his neck and the tightness, and he doesn't even care that he's uncomfortable. And so his mind is just consumed with this thought of crashing into this iceberg. He doesn't care that the passengers are laughing at him because he's filled with gratitude that he was given this life vest. So let's look at these two men real quick here. The first was promised something that would improve his trip, but when he didn't notice it improving anything, he got frustrated and he removed it and had this disbelief about why he would need a life vest since it didn't improve his trip. You see, he encountered difficulty, humiliation, and discomfort. Now the second one was told to wear a vest because it would save his life, because there was immediate danger. This man had no problem wearing this vest because he wanted to save his life. This man was ready for difficulty, and he wasn't concerned about humiliation or being uncomfortable because he knew he was going to be saved. While the two men are sitting on the ship, the captain announces to the ship's crew that they've hit an iceberg and the ship is sinking.